Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. There are many kinds of blueberry plants, but which variety is best for your garden? Also, cucumbers are a great addition to any vegetable garden. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Mike Dennison. Mr. D is a retired UT Extension agent, and Tom Mashour will be joining me later. All right, Mr. D, we're going to talk about blueberries, and I know you know a lot about blueberries because you grow blueberries.
Got a little experience with blueberries.
Experience.
That's right.
Okay. So let's start with the varieties here in the South.
Okay, here in the South, we recommend rabbit eye type and the southern high bush.
Okay.
And they do require cross-pollination, so you do need to plant two different varieties. But here in the southern United States, the rabbit eye types that were recommended are Brightwell, Premier, Centurion, Alapaha, Austin, Tiff Blue, Climax, Powder Blue, and Baldwin. Southern high bush, which is a hybrid cross of the northern high bush and rabbit eye types, they include O'Neill, Gulf Coast, Cooper, Georgia Gem, Cape Fear, Revell, Bladen, Blue Ridge, Jubilee, Magnolia, Pearl River, and Biloxi. And those clearly were produced by Mississippi State University, I'm sure. But the southern high bush varieties require 200 to 300 chill hours, and that's down toward the Gulf Coast north, up to probably the Tennessee, Kentucky line, something like that. That's pushing it northern part of Tennessee.
Okay.
Northern part of the country, and this information I got from Purdue University, and that's from the state of Missouri, Kentucky north. The northern high bush varieties require over 800 chill hours. And the chill hour is the number of hours accumulated over the winter between 32 degrees and 45 degrees. Okay. That's how you come up with your chill hours. And your extension service can help you with that.
They can help you with that.
Northern high bush varieties are Blue Crop, Blue Ray, Chandler, Elliott, Duke, Jersey, and Toro. Now the northern high bush blueberries generally are self-fertile. They will produce without cross-pollination. However, research has proven that if you cross-pollinate them, the blueberries will be bigger. And who doesn't like a big blueberry? No.
I do, that's for sure.
Like the bigger ones are better. Out west, California is such a long state. Yes, in Southern California, you use the same varieties we use here in the South, the rabbit eye and the southern high bush. Northern California, got to go with the northern high bush, and also Pacific Northwest and up in that neck of the woods. Another couple of types of blueberries that are out there, and I received this information from Oregon State University. Okay. These are blueberry that will grow across the entire northern United States and in southern provinces of Canada. They're called low bush blueberries. They are native to that area that I mentioned. Yeah. They are a low-growing shrub. They spread by underground stems. There are a few cultivars that are named. Blomidon, Burgundy, and Brunswick are named cultivars of the low bush blueberries. Now, another type of blueberry is a cross between those low bush blueberries that I just mentioned and the northern high bush varieties, and they're called half-high blueberries. Wow. They also require cross-pollination because their parents do. Okay. Several of those varieties are out there: Polaris, Northland, North Country, North Sky, Chippewa, North Blue, Brazelberry, Sunshine Blue, and Perpetua.
Sunshine Blue, I like it.
So those are the varieties that will work, and that's a lot more varieties and a lot more types than were common back in the day that I was doing extension work.
No doubt about it. And since you mentioned extension work, This is free information.
That's right.
The extension
It's,
service.
well, it's not free. Your tax dollars.
Well,
your tax
right,
dollars.
right,
Yeah, there's nothing
right.
free.
Right,
But
yeah.
your taxes cover that.
Right,
So,
right. So it's all covered.
So take advantage of it.
Take advantage of research-based
Research-based information.
Right.
And there's a lot of research going on in experiment stations around the country on blueberries, obviously, for all these new varieties that in the last 15 years, it's amazing how many different varieties have been produced since then, different types.
Yeah, it is good. So let's move into planting. Right.
Planting them, they're no matter the varieties that I mentioned, northern high bush, rabbit eye types, low bush, all of these they need an acidic soil, which is kind of unusual. Most plants need a soil that's only slightly acidic.
Right.
Blueberries need one, and azaleas, camellias, they need one that's very acidic, or the more acidic the better.
Yeah.
To a point, 4.8 to 5.2.
That's acidic.
And I would lean toward the 4.8.
Right.
Get a soil test.
Yes.
Start with a soil test, and that will. And you tell them in the soil test that you're going to grow blueberries, and they will tell you how much elemental sulfur to mix or to spread in the area to lower the pH to the level that it needs to be lowered to. And if you haven't planted them yet, if you till that in, that will that will lower the pH a lot quicker. Till it in. If you have planted them already, or if you don't want to till, you can just put it on top of the ground, and it is water soluble, and Mother Nature will take it on down. Water it in, or let the rain take it in.
Okay.
But get that pH down. When you plant the blueberries, select the site that's got at least 6 hours of sunlight. You need a well-drained soil. They don't like wet feet. Your planting hole, dig a planting hole that's twice as wide as the root ball if you're planting it. Now, my blueberries and most blueberries are 2-year-old seedlings, and there's not a great big root ball, but dig a wide hole, and you're going to want to add a couple of shovelfuls of peat moss or a good compost to increase the organic matter of that planting soil, and that is very, very important. That's as important as getting the pH right.
Okay.
Kind of mix that in with your soil and make sure you get it around the roots and everything, and that will help increase the survivability of those plants.
Yeah.
Of course, plant it at the depth that it grew in the nursery, and prune back the top of the plant by about 1/3. That will help balance the root zone with the above ground portion of the plant, because no matter how careful you are during the transplanting process, you're going to damage some of the roots, and you'll get a flush of growth after that, trying to compensate for that pruning that you do. Probably going to need to irrigate or water the first 2 or 3 years. Well, once they get established, that's not. You don't have to do that. I don't irrigate mine. Okay. They probably would be better if I did, but irrigation is not going to hurt.
Right.
If you don't over-irrigate. Don't over-irrigate. Plant them further apart than you think you need to plant them. The directions say 6 to 8 feet. I'd say if you're rabbit eye types, 8 to 10 feet, and then the low bush varieties and even the high bush, it's kind of strange. High bush are not as big as rabbit eye types.
Yeah,
high bush ought to be called low bush, in my opinion, but there are low bush ones out there. So you can plant the high bush varieties a little closer than we do the rabbit eye types. The rabbit eye types spread them out a little bit.
Right.
Again, very, very important to get that pH low. I've seen in commercial plantings where if you didn't do that, you had to redo it, do it over again. So pH, organic matter in the planting hole, and you're good.
Give it a good start.
That's it.
All right. Don't forget to check your local extension service. They will definitely have this information for you. Mr. D, that was good. Thank you much.
You're welcome.
That was good.
Let's talk about assumptions. assumptions can get you in trouble. For example, Roundup is a common herbicide, non-selective herbicide that used to have glyphosate as its active ingredient. Now there are products called Roundup that have other active ingredients in them. This one has 3 different herbicides, 3 different active ingredients in it. This product is called 7. Carbaryl used to be the active ingredient, only active ingredient that you would find in 7. Now there are several products out there that have ingredients other than carbaryl in them. My point is, read the label, read and follow the label directions. You might learn something.
All right, Mr. Tom, let's talk about cucumbers.
One of my favorite vegetables. I realize it's a fruit, legally speaking, but if it's in the garden, it's a vegetable.
It's a vegetable?
It's a vegetable.
All right, so you want to start with varieties first?
Yeah, there is a tremendous number of varieties of cucumbers. I'm particularly partial toward the light-skinned cucumbers. You got the dark skins like straight 8s and so forth, and some bush cucumbers. The thing I like about the light-skinned ones is they don't seem to get bitter in the summertime. Especially my favorite, I mentioned a couple years ago, is Sumter, S-U-M-T-E-R. It's a pickling cucumber. It's good flat eating. And like I said, it never gets bitter. A lot of times on the dark green cucumbers, that you can prevent the bitterness to a certain degree by maintaining a moist soil. What usually causes the bitterness is switching from dry to wet soil, and that pretty much causes it. Like I said, with the light-skinned ones, you don't have to worry about that. But like I said, there is a tremendous variety. They go from small ones to one of the larger ones is the Armenian yardlong.
Wow.
And it grows in a curve and can get 24 or longer. And so, I mean, I think I had actually one that did actually grow 3 feet.
That's pretty good size.
But it's an unusual one. It doesn't produce that many, but what it does produce are big.
Big. Yard.
Yeah.
Okay, yard. It's in the name. How about that? Now, what about planting cucumbers? How do we need to prepare the soils and how do we need to plant those?
Well, typically it's not a very demanding plant.
Okay.
Matter of fact, you don't even have to till it. You can just dig a hole and plant it. Now, I like to start pretty much all my plants in containers and then transplant them. I don't like to get down on my hands and knees and thin.
Okay.
So if I have anything I got to do, I'll do it in a flat and then pot them that way. I start now my beets in containers. Those multi-cell 54 to a count flat type cells.
Okay.
Having tremendous success with that.
Okay.
But as far as, and that's pretty much it. Now, when I first started growing cucumbers, I just let them sprawl. But as I start putting more things in my garden, like blueberries and stuff like that, my gardening area gets smaller and smaller. So I went to trellising them, and I used the cow panels, and I put them on the back or the south side of the garden so they don't shade the plants in front of them.
Okay.
Tremendous success doing that. They just climb right up. Initially, you have to give them a little head start, tell them where to go. And then once they figure out that, hey, this is where I need to go, they'll start wrapping their tendrils around it,
Right.
and up
They
they
got
go.
Okay. Now, what about soil pH?
Cucumbers, like most vegetables, they like it on the slightly acid range. 7 is neutral, as most people know. But 6.8 and all the way up to 7.3, which is slightly sweet, they do fine, no big problem.
Okay. All right, so what about fertilizing? Do you fertilize your cucumbers?
Yes, I do. Of course, a lot of it depends on your soil, and as every master gardener knows, first thing you always say is take a soil sample.
Yeah.
But on the soil samples, they don't test for nitrogen because it's very migratory, and the vast majority of nitrogen is in the air. So you put nitrogen in your soil, eventually it wants to go back home. So you have to keep adding it, where the phosphorus, potassium are minerals, they have a tendency to stay in the soil. So what I like to do is I like to alternate. I like to, and I fertilize lightly every 2 weeks. And I alternate between a high nitrogen fertilizer and then 2 weeks later, a balanced fertilizer.
Okay.
15, 15, 15, 10, 10, 10, 13, 13, 13. And by doing that, it seems to be the right combination.
Okay.
And the secret for growing big plants, one word, nitrogen.
Nitrogen. One word. Okay. All right, now what about diseases though? You know, because these are vines, right? They're going to be bunched up together, you know, for the most part. What about diseases?
Well, the cucumber beetle is probably the number one major problem.
Okay.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Okay.
And 7, or carabel, is that how you pronounce it?
Carbaryl.
Carbaryl. And it doesn't have to be 7, but it's a carbaryl product. Sprayed on it. And I like to use the liquid because it's with the liquid I can get under the leaves and stuff like that, which is much easier way of doing it than trying to do it with the powder, and the powder has a tendency to wash off the rain. The liquid type has a little bit more persistency to it, but keeping it sprayed once every 7 to 10 days is, Mike used to say, will work great for you. Now, I do not know the organic equivalent. I did a lot of research and I got a lot of opinions, but nothing factual as I can take to the bank.
Right, right.
But that's the number one problem. You don't have to worry about the squash borers because the vines are so thin that the little critter that lays the eggs doesn't bother it.
Okay.
And by the way, the cucumbers are a member of the cucurbits family. And a distinguishing character is that they have male blossoms and female blossoms on the same plant. And it's not really hard to identify it. On the squash, by the way, all the members of that includes not only cucumbers, but all your squashes, your melons, cantaloupes. And on the squash, watermelons, cantaloupes, it's really easy to distinguish the male from the female in the fact that the male flower just has a straight stem on the blossom, whereas the female has a miniature fruit behind the blossom. And if you want to speed up pollination, all you have to do is take a brush and go from the male flower to the female flower. And like I always mention, you know, soft music is optional. And the more fruit that's on the plants, the smaller the fruit's going to be.
Sure.
But it's just kind of cute. I like looking at it. I always like showing people that.
Right.
You know, the male and the female.
It is pretty cool to see, though. Yeah.
But like I said, they're all members of the same family. And the distinguishing character, as you know, that when they're grouping plants together is the blossom. So, and since they all have male and female, that's how come they're all gathered together.
Okay. Now, you talked about the pest problems with cucumbers. What about diseases? Are there any diseases we need to know about?
Not that I have noticed. There is some diseases listed, but they're very kind of rare. I think more of commercial farmers growing cucumbers would probably be more affected by the diseases than your typical home gardener. But as far as the other diseases go, if you got infested, the only thing you can do is pull them out and trash them. Do not throw them in a compost pile.
All right, Mr. Tom, we appreciate that information about cucumbers.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Milkweed is a very important plant to have in your garden because it's the host plant for the monarch butterflies' caterpillars. This is the only thing that they will eat. So it's very important that we grow it. Now, unfortunately, it's also a favorite plant for these little bright yellow aphids, and they are completely covering these things up. So the thing is, we want to protect our monarch caterpillars. We don't want to hurt them with an insecticide. So what we can do is just hose it off with water to try to get as many of the aphids off that we can. Or we can just simply wait for the ladybugs to show up, because pretty soon we'll have our beneficial insects arriving in our garden in the form of ladybug larvae. Make sure you know what they look like so you don't kill them, and adult ladybugs, and they'll help take care of the problem too. But for now, But since we don't see any ladybugs, I'm just going to hose them down. Now we're not going to get every single aphid this way, and you may have to do this every day for a while because they will come back quickly. All right, that took care of most of our aphids.
All right, Mr. D, here's our Q&A segment. These are some great questions.
They are.
All right, so let's start with our first viewer email. Our thornless blackberries have gone wild. How do I control them? And this is Catherine from Nesbitt, Mississippi. They start to sprout leaves, right? Shoots are growing in the grass. And she also wants to know, do I prune every year and when?
It's kind of an unusual problem for us to get, isn't it? Sounds like when they're growing too good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how does she control them if they're growing wild?
Mowing,
Okay.
hoeing,
Ah,
mulching. Those are some things that'll help.
okay.
You know, I would say. You know, give away, dig up some of the ones that are sprouting and give them away, spread them out. But that's a good problem to have. Do I prune every year?
Yeah.
And let me say, do not use herbicides, especially systemic herbicides, because if you spray the shoot, it will translocate to the mother plant.
Point,
so you don't want to do that. Do you prune every year? Yes, according to the National IPM database, there are floricanes, which are previous year's growth, and primal canes, which are the new canes, current season's growth. And according to the National IPM database, you remove all of the old canes after harvest in the summertime. That's a good thing to do. And the first year that you plant them, you remove the primal canes, remove the new growth to encourage more growth from the crown.
Right, okay.
So only the first year do you remove the primal canes. And the fruiting is going to occur on floricanes, but remove those the floricanes, and you ought to be, but that encourages them to do better.
I see, it's going to do a whole lot better.
So they'll go wilder, I guess. But I don't know, that's kind of an unusual problem, but you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I learned a lot about, of course, blackberries from you. But here's my thing. You definitely don't want them to get too out of control because of diseases, though.
Yeah.
Right. So anthracnose, is something that I thought about. Rosette, something else. So that's why you definitely don't want them to, get out of control. So
the pruning.
So pruning. So it goes back to pruning.
Goes back to pruning.
Right. It goes back to pruning at the end of the day, Miss Catherine. Yeah. So I hope that helps you out. That's going to be a lot of pruning, to do for sure, because you definitely don't want any disease pressure.
It may explain why I lost my blackberries. So they went wild and then they died.
Yeah, they would definitely go wild. So thank you, Ms.
And
Catherine.
I didn't prune them.
Yeah, and you didn't prune them.
And I didn't prune them.
There you go, Ms. Catherine.
Don't make my mistake. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Good question. Here's our next viewer email. Do I need a second plum tree to get fruit? And this is Mary from Mount Pelier, Virginia.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
They do require cross-pollination.
Yeah.
And that would solve that problem.
Right. So different variety, of course, would help. Definitely help if you knew what the first variety was. But you definitely need
so you may need to plant 2 more plum trees, just in case you happen to plant the same one that you got that way.
Right. Because cross-pollination, it's going to enhance fruit yield, of course, and fruit quality.
That's correct.
We know that at the end of the day. So there you have it, Miss Mary. You might need to get a couple more, just in case.
Or encourage your neighbor to, because it sounds like there's not a plum tree close by.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that question, Miss Mary. Hope that helps you out. Here's our next viewer email. Why do my turnip greens sprout, just sit there, and then die? This is Mary. She says she has not had problems except the last few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They recommend not planting turnip greens in the same spot every year. And as a matter of fact, once you grow turnip greens, they recommend giving it a 3-year rest before you put turnip greens back there again. There's a whole bunch of diseases that will attack turnip turnip greens. And anthracnose, Cercospora leaf spot, white spot, downy mildew, bacterial leaf spot, those are some of the ones that could be a problem. But that's probably the main thing. You need to move your turnip patch around your garden.
Crop rotation is what we call that.
Crop rotation,
right?
move it around. And may mean you may have to have a little smaller turnip green, but if they do real well, you don't need as big a spot, you know.
That is for sure. That's for sure.
I mean, can you think of anything else?
The thing with turnip greens, I would say, is they're probably best planted in the fall.
Yeah. When did she plant these?
We don't know.
Okay.
See?
Yeah.
That's what I say.
I guess I assume she planted them in the fall, but
best planted in the fall.
Yeah.
Because if you plant them too late, once you get to spring, it might get warm.
Yeah.
So I would do that in the fall.
That's for sure.
I'll definitely do that. So Mary, hope that answers your question. We appreciate that. Mr. D, fun as always. Fun as always. Thank you much. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is questions@familyplotgarden.com. And the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about growing blueberries or cucumbers, head on over to familyplotgarden.com. We have information there about these and many other fruits and vegetables. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.